Okay, and now we're going to talk about the meaning of life. Okay, guys, we're switching gears from knee pain to the meaning of life, which, in my opinion, is crazy. But listen, guys, those are the questions you guys picked. What is the meaning of life? Let me hear from you guys first. Meaning of life is to worship Allah or slash God. Okay, Allah means God for those of you who don't know it. Arabic. Okay, so any religion that says the word God in Arabic, they're gonna say Allah. To worship God. To worship God. I see a lot of theists out here. Worship God. What do you think of a superior psychological type in MMA? That's off topic. Stay on the topic. Colonize the universe. Oof. That's a tough one. Meaning of life, question, exam, everything. Especially when it comes to ethics. That's an interesting answer. Seeking truth, I assume. Live to the fullest. Know God. Sharing. Develop yourself. These are all really good answers. Kick ass and look good. To die. To die? Sensei, tell me more about that. That's an interesting one. The will to power. The will to power, actually, you know what? Some scholars say that Nietzsche didn't even write the will to power. Now they even question if he wrote the will to power. Interesting. I haven't really looked into it deeply enough, but I've heard that it's been questioned. Define yourself. What does that mean, define yourself? How does a person define themselves? To know thyself? I think you mean to know thyself. Seeking knowledge to benefit in this world and the hereafter. Well, that's a very interesting statement. There is no meaning, which means we get to make our own. Well, that's very nihilistic. Are you familiar with the history of nihilism? Okay, one of you keeps saying sex, okay? And now I'm gonna have to put you on a timeout. You're not being serious. Put user in timeout. Okay, you get a timeout for that, okay? Because you might have been serious. To recognize we are all one. What do you mean by that, Ibrahim? How are we all one? That's also a very interesting concept. How are we all one? In what sense are we all one? Be useful. That's very Leonardo da Vinci. You know, Leonardo da Vinci said, "I never tire of being useful." You know, near the end of his life. That's one of his famous quotes. What do you think of nihilism? I think that's a very important place to start. Okay, let's talk about nihilism. So nihilism is the position that, and again, there are versions of nihilism. Okay, I'm going to give you my understanding of nihilism. Nihilism is to basically tell yourself, look, if you become really intelligent, if you're an intelligent person, okay, and you start reaching higher levels of consciousness, you might come to the conclusion that there is no point if death is truly the end. Okay, if death is the end, then who cares if you get your job promotion? Who cares if some girl you ask to marry you marries you? Who cares if your children survive or die? Who cares if the world is gonna end tomorrow? Who cares? If you look at the timeline of the universe, you're just a blink of an eye. You're a speck of dust, you're a blink of an eye. When you step on an ant, do you worry about it? Do you think that, you know, this is a major problem and we should all get together and talk about this? Or do you say, look, it's insignificant, it's just an ant? Nihilism is to see your own life as just simply the insignificance of a microbe. Your life is just as insignificant as that of a microbe. Why? Because no matter what enjoyment you have in this life, death is raining on your parade. You have this nice parade. I'll give you guys a little metaphor. You have this nice parade, and now you have this thunderstorm. So you're rolling out this parade. You're trying to enjoy this parade, but death, the thunderstorm of death, is just raining down on you. You can't enjoy the parade. You just can't. It just ruined everything. That, if I can give you a metaphor for nihilism, I would say that's one that my philosophy professor gave me, and it made me laugh. It made me chuckle. It's a great picture to explain the depths of nihilism in a very easy way. Yes, Nietzsche is very famous for his discussion on nihilism. Does anybody know what Nietzsche's solution to nihilism was? Why did Nietzsche talk about nihilism? Yes, Imam Ghazali talks about the meaning of life, and hopefully we'll get to Imam Ghazali, a great Arabic philosopher that I'm doing a lot of reading on. And guys, I will have to do multiple. We're gonna have to probably do multiple episodes on this. Okay, I know we don't have a lot of time, so we're probably not gonna get to the meaning of life. Maybe we'll scratch the surface and make for a fun sequel to this question. If you guys keep upvoting this question, I will keep answering it for you guys. We'll keep working on it. So why did Nietzsche say that life is so nihilistic, and why did he say, what was his, excuse me, what was his solution to nihilism? What was his solution? He said, look, people are working in, now he saw the industrial age coming about. People are no longer working in nature. Okay, when you work in nature, you have a certain psyche that develops, right? You're planting a seed, and that seed grows, and it makes you think about God and nature, and it makes you think about the forces of life. But now people are moving into the industrial age. They're just working mechanically now. They're gonna have no rapport with the end product. So a farmer, he would take great joy in having his crop shared by the town or whatnot. You know, those are Jim's apples. You know, those are Mike's corn. You know, like everything would be we know who we're getting our produce from. We know who's the shoemaker. We know them. We'd have a rapport, and they would take great respect. They would get respect for being known as being skilled. However, now we're moving in the industrial age. Now you're just a dude screwing a bolt on a screw over and over again, and the end product, you have nothing to do with it. You were just the guy who screws in the bolts. He just tightens the bolts. And another guy is the guy who cuts the sheet metal, and another guy is the guy who assembles the two, and another guy is the guy who welds them together. And the industrial age is going to rob us of this experience. Now, this was just a small problem. He said, look, eventually people are going to become more and more atheists. And what's going to happen when they become more and more atheists? It's funny because Jordan Peterson talks about this. He talks about this quite a bit. He says, look, Nietzsche was saying, look, you have theism, you have this belief in God, and then you're going to take it from these people, or they're going to lose it. What's going to happen is you're going to have this vacuum. And this vacuum is going to be filled with nihilism. Keep a long story short, fast forward to today, Jordan Peterson is saying, look, ethics comes from religion. You know, there's no civilization that didn't start with a religion or have a religion. There's no civilization. Anthropologists will tell you, we cannot find any civilization that didn't have some religion, and their ethics comes from religion. So he says, look at today, you know, a lot of people are preaching atheism. And he's saying, look what's happening to the West. We took out religion. And we think that with our own reason, we're going to figure out what's right and wrong. Do you guys think that just by reflection, just by using your reason, you could have come up with the 10 Commandments? Do you think that the reason is self-evident? Do you think that by reason you could have convinced your society that you're living in, let's not murder, let's not steal from one another, let's not cover each other's neighbors' wives, let's not commit these vices. They're bad for our community. Do you think that you could reason your way to this? It's not that easy. You know, people think, oh no, it's the Enlightenment. Yeah, the Enlightenment. We can reason for ourselves what's right and wrong. Actually, Nietzsche was very opposed to this. Nietzsche said, look, there is no right and wrong. If you take away God, if you're an atheistic culture, and I'm not saying the atheists don't know right and wrong. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, like Jordan Peterson says, the root comes from religious traditions. We got our sense of right and wrong. What you take for granted today, what you think is so self-evident, actually was not a product of reason. Now, if you're going to call religion reason, that's another topic. But it came from religion. If we're talking about reason as in pure logic, the rationalists did not create the standard right and wrong we have today, the majority of what we would agree on. I know we don't agree on exactly what's right and wrong. I'm not talking about the trivial matters. I'm talking about the key points that we all agree is right and wrong. Okay? Like murder. We all agree murder is wrong. We all agree stealing is wrong. Okay? The vast majority of us. If you've read Euthyphro, now a lot of you guys are always asking me for book recommendations. I'm going to recommend a book for you right now, the Euthyphro. The Euthyphro book from Plato is a very fun and easy read. It's not complicated like the other texts, okay? Like the Parmenides is super complicated. The Gorgias is super complicated. The Euthyphro is a fun, easy, soft landing for somebody who's just starting off in reading. Is anybody out there familiar with the Euthyphro? The book of Euthyphro? I'm not saying reason didn't exist before religion. I'm saying our standard view of ethics today comes from religion. That's what I'm saying. Not the same thing. Okay, so really, really different. I know it's a bit confusing. I know it's not. These are not simple topics, guys, and I mean that with the utmost respect. These are very confusing topics for me too. When I started learning these topics, you know, I was always trying to define what do they mean by what they're saying. Most anthropologists agree that civilizations all had a religion. All ancient civilizations had a religion, and they derived their ethics from these religions. Okay, we all know the Abrahamic faiths. Okay, what we standardize as right and wrong today comes from the Abrahamic faiths. Okay, now most people think no, it comes from our reason. Actually, it doesn't. Okay, a great book to point that out, a great book that points that out, is the Euthyphro. Now, the Euthyphro is before Western civilization converted to Christianity and the Abrahamic faiths. In the Euthyphro, they're discussing what is right and what is wrong. How do we define what is right, and what is morally wrong? Yes, Greek philosophy has a lot to do with our concepts of right and wrong, but that book, Euthyphro, has a central theme. It has a central question. What is the central theme and central question of the Euthyphro? Does anybody out there know? In the book of Euthyphro, the central question is something right? And this is irrelevant if you believe in God or not, okay? And Socrates understood that his audience may or may not believe in God. The Greeks did believe in God. They believed in many gods, etc. But this question is not asked solely to a theistic person. You could ask this question to an atheist. Absolutely, this is not a problem. Okay, so don't take this as where Socrates was presupposing the existence of God. It's irrelevant. It's irrelevant to that question. Yes, Jay, that's correct. That's the correct spelling of Euthyphro. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Socrates asked the question. He says, look, is right and wrong. Does God say something is right or wrong because its nature is good or bad? So is killing wrong? Does God say killing is wrong because killing has the germ of evil in it? Or is it wrong just because God said so? It doesn't have a germ of evil or good. It's God who's the measuring stick. God tells us what's right and wrong, and we go by his definition. Or does killing have a germ of evil? Gred Adam, that is completely wrong. You're saying that Imam Ghazali later repented and said that philosophy is haram. No, it's not. Philosophy is not haram. Please check the work of Frank Griffel. Okay, he wrote a book on Imam Ghazali. When Imam Ghazali was talking about the philosophers, this is a little tangent here, okay? This is a very popular misconception. Very popular misconception. A famous philosopher in the Arab world, he wrote a book called the Tahaffut, the slip up of the philosophers. When he was talking about the philosophers, he was talking about a particular group, the Mu'tazila. He's talking about a particular group of philosophers, not philosophy as a whole. Philosophy translates to lover of wisdom, okay? Don't forget that. And Imam Ghazali is exhaustive in explaining that any truth we shouldn't say something is true or false from who said it. It doesn't matter if a pagan says it, or a Greek says it, or an Italian says it, or a tall person says it, or a short person says it. If what they say is true, we have to accept it. If what they say is false, we have to reject it, regardless of who the person is. We don't know the truth by who says it. We know the truth by its evaluation. Okay, this is a very important distinction that he makes. So he is in no way, this is such a misconception. Some people say, oh, Ghazali was against mathematics, or he was against reason. Far from it, absolutely far from it. Somebody who says that has never read the Confessions. Somebody who says that has never read the Deliverance from Error. It's the total opposite of that. Imam Ghazali believed in mathematics so much that he gives an example in his Confessions. He says, look, if somebody tried to tell me that 7 is less than 3, and to bring me his proof, he turned the staff into a snake. Now, he doesn't believe in magic. Now, Imam Ghazali does not believe in magic. But he's saying if somebody came and did something, produced an incredible miracle, he says, I would still believe that 7 is more than 3. He couldn't convince me in no way, shape, or form that 7 is less than 3, even if he could produce magic. Okay, so don't forget, that comment is philosophy itself. Okay? He's using reason and logic. So Imam Ghazali was a lover of reason and logic. Now, one day we'll have another episode. We'll talk about Imam Ghazali, okay? Because he does something really special in his work. He does something really special in his work. So I really recommend you read the work for yourself and read commentary on his work and not just say what most people, just the rumors. Okay, so we were talking about ethics. Where do ethics come from? If there is no God, okay, Nietzsche would tell you, if you're not a theist, then who's going to say what's right and wrong? This is a very deep topic, okay? This is a very, very deep topic. Who's to say who's right and wrong? Tell me, who's to say who's right and wrong? It all becomes, listen carefully to this one. And a lot of you guys are going to hate this, okay? But it all becomes aesthetics. What does that mean? Whatever you perceive as good or handsome or pretty, you're going to consider it to be true and good. Whatever you see as evil or against your interest, you're going to view as bad. Now, this is not everybody's standard. Okay, this is not everybody's standard. But what Socrates was trying to say is, if you're going to say that things are in themselves evil, they have a germ of evil, or the good has a germ of good, to prove that logically is very difficult. It turns out that why you see a germ of good and why you see a germ of evil is really because it pleases you. You find it aesthetically pleasing. Now, this is going to be objected to, I'm sure, okay? But it's something to read and think about because it's not that easy to absorb. But don't you find a lot of times when people say something is good or bad, it's usually because they find it aesthetically pleasing? There's no way to prove the logical germ of evil within that one thing. The only way we could prove there's a germ of evil is if God says it himself. Then it's unquestionable. Perspective is an illusion. Now, that's very interesting. Paradigms are illusionary. I would agree with you. Perspectives. I agree with that. Perspective is very, very interesting. Man, I'm getting some crazy comments here. What is a life well lived? Well, listen, that's an interesting question, guys. We're gonna have to talk about this on future podcasts because this is a touchy one. Look, if you're asking me my own personal opinion is to seek truth. Okay, if you come upon the truth, you don't care about death anymore. You don't care about nihilism anymore. It's irrelevant to you. Now, here's my question to you all. Okay, now we're shifting gears here a little bit, but it's also very, very pertinent. Is truth absolute or is truth relative? These are two very important questions. I remember, you guys were asking me to listen to some Sam Harris. So I listened to some debate between Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson. Now, Sam Harris was saying, look, there's an absolute truth. And Jordan Peterson was trying to say, no. There's only true enough. We can never get to absolute truth. And this was kind of frustrating Sam Harris, okay? And this is a classic argument that Socrates had with Gorgias, that Ghazali had with Avicenna, and that Leibniz had, that Descartes had with Voltaire, and so on and so on. This is a classic argument. Is there an absolute truth, or is truth relative? Let me know what you guys think. Absolute. Giovanni Pablo says absolute. Who says relative? Who says absolute? Depends if it's personal based or group based. Now I'm talking about absolute truth. There's a truth out there that whether you believe it or not exists. It exists. Believe it or not, it's still true and it's irrelevant to your opinion. Nobody has the truth. Truth is absolute. Absolute. I'm getting a lot of absolutes. So relative. Adventure 147 says it's relative. Absolute. I'm getting a lot of absolutes. 2 + 2 = 4. Okay, so that's a great argument. 2 + 2 = 4. Now, if I tell you 2 + 2 = 4, that's some people argue against that and they say it's a tautology. You haven't told me anything new. So for instance, let's say I tell you, this is my wife. I married her. When I said she's my wife, I also told you I married her, right? So why did I tell you I married her? It was useless information. It's a tautology. It's useless information. If I say, hey guys, I'm a bachelor and I'm also unmarried, you'd be like, that's totally useless information. When you told me you're a bachelor, you also told me you're unmarried. You didn't have to add that on. When I say triangle, I don't have to tell you, hey guys, this triangle has 3 points. A triangle, by its virtue of being a triangle, has 3 points. So when you say 2 plus 2 equals 4, you're really telling me 2 plus 2, here's another way to say it, 4. So some people argue that math doesn't really give us any new information. Math is just another way of thinking about something. You gave me information, then you just interpreted it in a different way. So some people do criticize math this way. Okay? I agree with you that 2 plus 2 equals 4, but really some people are arguing that, hey, look, you haven't said anything that's true. You've just repeated information. Something you allege to be true. Now, anybody ever hear the argument between Harris and Peterson? Anybody ever hear that discussion? We're going to have to do a whole episode on this. We're going to have to do a whole... Guys, go to Sly and ask me to do, please, because I want this to be number 1. I want to do a full breakdown of that discussion. Okay? Sam Harris says to Jordan Peterson, how could you say that something's only true enough, you know? Only good enough to move forward? Because Peterson's view is that, look, truth is, if it's absolute, even if it's absolute, you can't get to it. You'll never know absolute truth. You'll only know something that's true enough. And then you can keep on moving forward to higher and higher truth. But you'll never get to the truth absolutely. Sam Harris is really good at making thought experiments up. Okay, he makes them up on the fly, it seems. And he says this, he says, look, he imagines a scenario where we have to count the number of hairs on Jordan Peterson's body. And he says there's either an odd number of hairs on your body or an even number of hairs on your body. This is a binary answer. It can't be both. You cannot have at the same time an odd number of hairs and have an even number of hairs on your body. And he also supposes that there's an evil tribe of some sort that will kill you if you have an even number of hairs. They only allow odd number of hairs on your body. But that's irrelevant. Let's put that to the side for now. Is it a fact that you have an even number of hairs on your body or an odd number of hairs on your body? I think Jordan Peterson would agree that there's an even or odd number of hairs. I think what he disagrees with is whether you'll ever know that. Imagine you're counting the hairs and you've counted one of the hairs twice. Isn't that a possibility? Of course it is. We could always create doubt in your assessment of any empirical truth. So for instance, let's say Sam Harris counts the hairs on your body twice, and he has them recounted by someone else, an expert counter, and then counted by a third party and a fourth party and a fifth party that's independent. Their interest is independent of the result. Jordan Peterson could always say yes, but he could always say something. He could always object. Why? He could say, look, I think that you've counted the hairs on the body, but as you were counting, maybe a hair fell off. You can't discount that possibility. So Jordan Peterson is basically saying, look, I can always poke a doubt. I can always create a doubt. You are unable to give me perfect proof. You're never able to give him perfect proof. Now, Jordan Peterson doesn't word it in this way, but I think that's what he was getting to. Okay, now Sam gives another example. Okay, and I'm going to shorten the example a little bit. He says, look, because Jordan Peterson was trying to say, look, we believe what's good for us, what we find aesthetically pleasing, what we find beautiful, what we find helps us in life. That's what we call true. What we call true is not really true in the sense of the ultimate sense, absolute sense. He says you're kidding yourself when you think that. Well, Sam Harris comes up with another thought experiment. He says, look, what if you show a man, imagine a man who sees a picture of his wife, and that picture is a picture of her cheating on him. And he believes it and he kills himself. Now that belief wasn't good for him. He didn't find it attractive. He didn't find it appealing. It wasn't the most aesthetic. And killing himself didn't make it untrue. I think Jordan Peterson would say something that's very Marcus Aurelius, you know, that comes from the page of a Marcus Aurelius. He would say, look, cheating on you is a narrative. Maybe she had sexual intercourse with the guy, but cheating, if you dig deeper into the story, maybe it wasn't cheating. So let's imagine a scenario. Now, he doesn't give one. Peterson didn't give one, okay? But I'll give you a better one, okay? Let's give a better one. Let's say, for instance, the picture was doctored. It was Photoshopped. Maybe at least the man could say, no, that picture is Photoshopped. I don't believe it. Peterson's point would still stand true. Now, the guy who killed himself, he obviously didn't do a lot of investigation. What if the woman in question, we later find out she has a brain tumor? Okay, she has a brain tumor, and this brain tumor changed her personality. It changed her way of viewing things. It changed her thought process. And then later on, she's cured from this brain tumor, and she's once again back to normal, and she would never cheat on her husband. It's not impossible. It's maybe highly unlikely, but not impossible. What Jordan Peterson is trying to say ultimately is you do not have perfect proof. All you have is circumstantial evidence. Whenever we try to get to truth, all we find is circumstantial evidence all the time. So we can always poke a doubt in these beliefs. Now, this is very interesting because two very famous philosophers, one of them being Imam Ghazali and one of them being René Descartes, wanted to eliminate this completely. Imam Ghazali wanted to eliminate this from religion, and René Descartes wanted to eliminate this from reason. And they both come up to very, very deep and profound answers. Okay, very, very deep and profound answers that I'm probably not going to have time to get into today because we are 1 hour in. Okay, so guys, go to Slido, and if you guys want to keep this direction going, make this question number 1. Okay, we'll keep going on this one question. But René Descartes and Imam Ghazali do something really, really excellent. Okay, now I don't want to leave the Greeks out of this. The Greeks were phenomenal thinkers, but the Greeks had a whole other tangent they went down. Okay, and we'll talk about those books. We'll talk about the Phaedo. We'll talk about the Parmenides. We'll talk about the classic writings that try to tackle this subject. What is true and it's perfect proof? Nobody can poke the slightest doubt in it. And I think there are answers to this, but guys like Jordan Peterson and the sophists were not easy to satisfy. There is an absolute truth. Plato's world of the forms. Well, you know what? If you read the Parmenides, you're going to be a little bit disappointed. If you read the Parmenides, Socrates is taking the position of the forms. So those of you who don't know what the forms are the absolute truths that exist in some abstract world. They're not subject to the empirical flaws, the flaws of this world. When you look at the world here, whenever you try to study the physical world, it always slips out of our grasp. It always slips out of our grasp. Now, Parmenides gives Socrates a beating. Guys, there's 40 books. Plato wrote 40 books, and Socrates he's the main character of almost all the books. And he doesn't take any beating in any of the books, except in the Parmenides. In the Parmenides, he takes a shellacking, okay? And the forms take a shellacking. Now, I'm not telling you that, I don't want to tell you that the forms are a done deal, but it proves to be absurd, okay? The forms are not necessarily true in themselves, and a lot of philosophers today don't believe in the forms, okay? Now, that's a deep topic. We'll have to talk about it another day. But Parmenides' theory of the one also takes a bit of a beating later on in the text. Okay, so they don't necessarily get into... the Greeks never reach a full conclusion. Socrates in the Phaedo says, which is very interesting because he gets to a similar answer to Imam Ghazali. Very interesting, okay? Socrates says, look, when I die, I'm finally going to wake up to the truth. This body keeps holding me back. Every time I come close to the truth, this body holds me back. When I die, finally, I'm going to get wisdom. I'm going to get to know the absolute truth, the one we're talking about. Now, what do they mean when they say that the truth always eludes them? I'm going to wrap up with this, guys, okay? So, the Arabs burnt Aristotle's work. That's not true. That's not true, okay? It was actually, I don't want to get into that because I don't want to start a war here, but that's not true. The Arabs preserved philosophy, okay, and actually corrected philosophy as well. They made a lot of improvements on philosophy. What were we talking about? Okay, so look, picture, there's a lot of classic paradoxes in philosophy, okay? Here's one of my favorite. I think you guys are going to... yes, Ibn Rushd did translate and commented on Aristotle. Absolutely, and the Christians learned a lot about philosophy through Ibn Rushd. They called him the commentator. That was how they referred to him, as the commentator, because he explained the thoughts and he's known also as the corrector of Aristotle. Okay, he was a phenomenal thinker. Averroes. Okay, so picture a coast on a beach. Picture a coast. And we want to measure the coastline. And now you see the coastline is very jagged. Has a lot of jagged lines. And I'm going to give you a 1 meter. I'm going to give you a meter, a stick, okay, 100 centimeter stick, and I'm gonna ask you, look, measure this coast, and you're gonna take that stick and you're gonna measure it, and you're gonna count how many meters, and then you're gonna convert those meters into miles. Okay, now I gave you a distance from A to B, and you measured the coast, and you measured that it was 10 miles long. Okay, I'm holding the mic here, guys, so that's why I was flashing 5, but I meant 10. Okay, because I gotta hold this mic. So the coast is 10 miles long. Then I give you a smaller measuring stick. Okay, I give you a meter, a half a meter stick. I give you a half a meter. So instead of giving you a 100 centimeter stick, I'm giving you a 50 centimeter stick. And now you're laying this centimeter stick over and over on the coast. And because the stick is smaller, it's fitting into the crooks and the crannies a little bit more. So that at the end of your measurement, you have 12 miles long. The coast now is 12 miles long. Why is it 2 miles longer? You were able to get into the crooks. You got a more accurate measurement. Now imagine I give you a wheel. You know those wheels that turn, and every time they do one revolution, they counted 1 meter. Now that wheel gets into the crooks and crannies a lot more. Why? Because the surface area of the wheel is very small. And now you end up measuring the coast again, and this time it's 15 miles long. Why? Because you got into the crooks and crannies even deeper. So we went from 10 miles long to 14 miles long to 15 miles long. And the more sharp and the more accurate the measuring device, the longer and longer the shore keeps getting. So we can no longer objectively measure the shore. Why? Because the more and the instrument can be infinitely accurate. It can keep getting more and more accurate till it's measuring the atoms. And even when you measure the atoms, you can keep going to the elementary particles. And when you go to the elementary particles, we eventually lose where matter is completely. So the coast, in one way, is 10 miles long, 14 miles long, 15 miles long, infinite amount of miles long. We're always losing an absolute measure, an objective 100% measure. And this happens with weight, because weight fluctuates. Okay, this happens with time. This happens with everything we try to measure and control objectively. It seems that we know only objectivity theoretically. But when we go to apply it in the world, there's always a realm of subjectivity. There's always a base for doubt. Now, I'm going to end this with this, okay? This last few comments here, because we're over time. There are 3 ways to know something, okay? 3 ways. 1 is empirically, through the senses. 2 is logically, okay? The second way. So the first way is empirically. The second way is logically, through the mind, deduction. And the third way is intuitively, okay? We got to talk about this, a whole episode on just epistemology, how we know things, okay? So it seems whenever we try to apply our logic to the world, it escapes us slightly. The world is always creating some kind of paradox. And luckily, a lot of philosophers eventually fall back, or a lot of religious thinkers actually, Sufis, the mystics. Okay, I don't like to use the term Sufi because today Sufism is such a wild and diverse idea. But the early mystics, especially the Muslim mystics, they revert back to intuition, or Descartes' cogito, or Socrates is death will bring us absolute truth. And again, I know this sounds like crazy claims, but wait till we get to their epistemology. How did they get to this claim? You know, don't forget, these were all professional thinkers. This is the culmination of decades and decades of philosophy. And the parallels are interesting between the Greeks and the Arabs and the Renaissance philosophers. The parallels are really interesting. And luckily for me, I've studied all 3 groups. Especially now I'm studying the Arabs a lot more, and it's really interesting, the dynamic between all 3. You are describing an impossible task. Mustafa, don't jump the gun. Don't jump the gun. There is one thing that everybody agrees on, okay? And we'll get to that. Even the most hardcore atheists, there's something, the atheists, the theists, the rationalist, the empiricist, the radical skeptic, all of us, we at least agree on one thing, and we got to start from there. That is the nucleus. We got to start from there. Have you heard of Hamza Tzortzis? Yes, actually, I've corresponded with him a little bit, and I have his book. He sent me his book as a gift. Very nice guy, very interesting guy, very intelligent human being, super intelligent guy. Black belt in philosophy. Well, I'm not sure who you're referring to, but if you're referring to me, thank you. I appreciate that. Coast measurements, very good example. I will reuse it. Thanks. Please do. It's an interesting. That's just the tip of the iceberg. There are a lot more paradoxes. There are a lot more. The Tao Te Ching. Listen, the Tao Te Ching I'm not as familiar with. Okay, I've picked up a book here and there on the Tao Te Ching. I know Lao Tzu is a famous thinker. I'm not that familiar with it. So if you guys have any references or sources, good sources, send them my way. I'd love to review. You are very wrong. Distance from A to B is the same. No, it's not, my friend. Anax, please do demonstrate it. Okay, please do demonstrate it. We can only really do that in the abstract sense on the board. But when you go measure it in real life, the more accurate the instrument, the longer the measurement. Okay, there's actually a really nice documentary called, look it up. Okay, it's called How to Measure a Piece of String, and they go into this problem. How long is a foot? Do you guys know the history of how long a foot is? We don't know exactly how long a foot is. We don't know. The measurements that they used in the past was an Egyptian prince or king or whatnot. They used like his forearm of some sort. But that stick that they use over time, it shrunk and it expands with the humidity and the temperature, etc. There are literally places in the world right now where they keep, they try to keep, I think it's a steel alloy or whatever it is, material that doesn't shrink or expand too much. And they keep it at the right temperature. They keep the temperature controlled so that it doesn't shrink or expand too much. So they can always have a frame of reference for what a foot is. Don't forget, your measuring tape, it does shrink and expand. Like your ruler that you have since you're a kid is slightly off. It's slightly off. And when they made it, it was slightly off. And since you've been using it all these years, that it's expanded. We're talking about a very small amount, but it's still an amount. We don't know exactly over the thousands of years what we agreed to what a foot was. If it's half an inch longer or shorter, or even a millimeter longer or shorter, we're not sure. Thoughts on objectivism. Listen, objectivism, there's a lot, you know, philosophy is endless. Thought is endless. I haven't gotten to objectivism yet. I'm planning on it, definitely. I've heard of the objectivism, but I haven't myself personally read the Ayn Rand texts yet. Heard of shamanism? No, I have not heard of shamanism. Please do enlighten me. Do you know Machiavelli? Yes, I have been familiarized. I've come across him in my textbooks. Machiavelli, he's one of the most famous and influential human beings. And yes, I have heard of him, no doubt. I know that the Greeks' foot was a fraction of a stadium, which was the measurement of a Greek stadium. Yeah, but you know, how do we keep that standard over time, over years, right? What's your take on psychedelics for exploring consciousness and spirituality? Well, here's my opinion. Psychedelics have a very, very negative effect on the body. You do not need psychedelics. You can have the benefits of dropping. From what I understand, again, guys, I'm not an expert on this, okay? So I'm gonna give you guys a heads up. From what I understand, okay, look, there is an experience that's talked about where if you drop the ego or you lose the ego, the Sufis will tell you this, okay? Imam Ghazali will tell you this. Descartes was trying to tell you, look, Socrates was trying to tell you, look, I'll have to die physically for me to get to know the truth. The mystics say, no, look, you can die in this life. Okay, now for those of you who know the Islamic religion, there's a famous hadith, die before you die, okay? The ego has to die. All your paradigms have to die. All your presuppositions have to die. Imam Ghazali eventually reasons to, look, I have to suspend my empirical beliefs. I have to suspend my deduction, my logic. I have to suspend it all. I have to let it all die. I have to let the self die. And then intuition will take over. Now, this is a very, very, very profound subject. Now, people who take LSD, they'll tell you crazy. They'll write down poetry when they're high, and they'll write stuff that's very, like, mystic-like. Okay, very mystic-like. Why? Some people theorize is because they've gotten to that place where they've dropped the ego. They've dropped their paradigms, etc. Now, in my opinion, you don't need this. You don't need to get hooked, addicted, rot your brain, etc. You don't want to take the risk with your health, okay? So there's no need for that. There's no need. All you need is exploration, self-knowledge, thinking, rationalizing, and you will get there. Now, reason, the big critique of reason, okay? Somebody mentioned Ibn Taymiyyah. He gives the best critique of reason. He says, look, if reason is so good, and we agree that reason is good, everybody agrees reason is good, okay? Only the radical skeptics, only the sophists will say reason doesn't exist. But to say that reason doesn't exist, you have to give us a rational argument. Once you're giving us a rational argument for why reason is relative, you are admitting that reason is true, because you're reasoning that reason is false. So it's self-defeating. Okay, you might not be able to wrap your mind around it the first few times you hear it, but believe me, this is true. You cannot argue logically against logic. You're proving logic. You're taking the position of logic to defeat logic, which is nonsensical. You've in fact admitted to logic by doing that. Okay, so we agree that logic is true, but Ibn Taymiyyah, he said, look, Socrates and Plato and Aristotle didn't agree, and supposedly they were the best at logic. Ibn Ghazali and Avicenna didn't agree, and supposedly they were the best at logic. Descartes and Voltaire didn't agree, and supposedly they were the best at logic. They don't agree. Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson, today's most popular intellectuals online. Okay, I know you might refer to even higher intellectual. I no doubt that they are, but let's just take the most popular guys for today. They don't agree. They tried to do a 2-hour episode on what is the truth. They couldn't agree. Now, why can't we agree? Here's what, and it's a very humble position, and I have to say, your reason will take you so far, but then eventually you have to abandon reason. Reason tells us, look, we are not worthy of using this power tool. This reason is a sacred thing. Reason is, by definition, true and correct. However, it's so beyond us to actually reason because of your prejudice, because of your ego, because of your appeal for aesthetics. You will not be able to get to the truth. You're the problem, not logic. Logic is perfect. You're the problem, okay? Your weaknesses, your inabilities, your assumptions, your presuppositions, all of these things are why you can't use logic. Is anybody out there free of error? Is anybody out there the perfect logician? We'd have to say no. Why? Because they're all human. Humans make errors. Have you ever done a math problem and made an error? Of course you have. It's nonsensical to ask for proof or logic. Well, it depends what you mean by that, Philosopher King. Okay, but I think at the end, we go from empiricism to logic, and then we graduate from logic to intuition. And intuition is the most logical. Intuition is the most logical answer in the end, in my opinion. And I think most people have to agree to at least one intuitive thought we have, at least one. But we'll have to save that for another episode, guys. We're going to talk about intuition, how we know it. This is a very deep topic. I want to thank you guys for sticking around. For those of you, we're 280 on this one. Wow. I can't believe you guys stuck around this long. Congratulations. You have an IQ of over 100, no doubt. Easily over 100. If you're listening to this, man, you have an IQ of easily over 100. The average IQ in Canada is 99, and the average IQ in America, from what I remember, is 98. So you guys, I would say, if you're listening to this and you're understanding this, you're easily above that. Okay, so congratulations. Over 9,000. Rafiq, you are the man. If you are over 9,000, dude, write a book. Please do write a book. Now, go to Slido, guys. Slido, our Slido event number for this channel is 5419. Upvote. If you guys want to talk about logic, reason, intuition, epistemology, let me know. It gets deeper. We couldn't even scratch the surface today. We talked about Plato, Ghazali, Descartes. We haven't even scratched the surface. We'd have to do a whole episode on just this. Empiricism, logic, and intuition. For those of you who are interested, check out Plato's Phaedo, the book of Phaedo. Check out Imam Ghazali's Deliverance from Error, or The Confessions, a great place to start. Or check out René Descartes' The Meditations, another great book. And I think you guys will enjoy them. Thank you very much for tuning in, and I will see you all in